And it's like the difference between sorry because you did it, not sorry because you got caught.
Like, that's the world I want to live in.
It's not a vibe kill by bringing it up.
We are joined by Tom Forrest, a journalist, content creator, and proud Yorta Yorta man who cares about honest conversations. Hi, Tom.
G'day.
And we're joined by Kath Ebbs, a queer actor, presenter, and content creator with a passion for advocacy.
Hello.
Hello. And Louis Phillips, an athlete and fitness influencer who speaks openly about the value of healthy relationships.
G'day.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. What kind of behaviour around like the schoolyard are you now sus on that was really normal at the time?
I remember at one of the high schools I went to, a rumour was started about a couple in year 10 and like something they'd done privately in a relationship, and this rumour kind of spread throughout the school. And at that time, it was so probably shocking for these students to hear these things. You know, this sexual act that is like, you know, for year 10 students was this crazy thing. And I guess looking back now, it was really easy and common to talk about other people and what they were doing, like during those earlier days, like year 10, 11, 12 relationships. Whereas like now as an adult, it's not a thing, right? Like no one's kind of like, oh, I heard this person hooked up with this person, right? Maybe that, but never these explicit details on exactly what they done. Whereas when you're like a teenager, and I just remember seeing the couple and seeing the young bloke feeling really uncomfortable and upset about this rumor that had been started or this information that had been gotten out. So it seemed so normalized when I was in school to like people talking about these different students and what they'd done in private. And now as an adult, I'm like, no one does that because, you know, it is their own private information and, you know, something that two people have, you know, consensually done together in a partnership. And so, yeah, I look back at that and like that is a bit sus in my eyes how just normal it was to talk about other people's business, essentially.
Yeah, the rumour mill in those ages is brutal.
It's crazy.
Like, particularly when you have people who are maybe a little bit more mature and in relationships versus, you know, I didn't have a girlfriend until I was in year 11 or something. So people when I was in year 10 who were having sex and in relationships, that was like such a foreign land to me. And the disparity in that, I think, is really tough years to come to terms with, oh, these people are growing up and maybe I'm a little left behind or vice versa.
I remember when I was a young person, I would have friends that would get sent a nude and they'd show you without even batting an eyelid. And you think about that now and like that's crook as.
Yeah.
But I think that even nowadays that young people would probably have that happen, they wouldn't think anything about it. Young guys are talking to each other and they're saying like, who have you had sex with, like whatever. And that's where it starts and that's where it goes from.
Bryn, I just want to say, I think that's a really great point. Like if, you know, and you're right, you know, young blokes in that high school area in that young age, and like you mentioned, they'll, you know, someone they've been chatting to will send them a nude and they'll show their mates. It's such an invasion of privacy and not respecting the person like at all, essentially. And then as you get older, like, you know, I have not experienced in like what feels like decades that someone's like, oh, I have this nude pic of a girl. I'm like, brother, I don't want to see it. Like, that's your thing, my bro. Like, you know, and, you know, I think there is nothing embarrassing or negative or bad or unhealthy about sending your partner a nude photo. You're allowed to do that if you both want to do that, you know, but it's then the invasion of privacy showing other people and that's when it comes down to like nudes getting leaked, right? Like someone is putting that out there. So yeah, that's 100%. I can agree with that. Very, very like not good behavior.
I think a lot of those norms stem from a lack of education as kids as well. We're just kind of thrust into this world with technology, but no real roadmap around how to navigate it. And that takes us to my next question, which is, did you get consent education at school? What was your sex education like?
I remember my first like introduction. I remember it's like really hyped up when you're in year like 5 and 6 in primary school, like you're gonna like get the talk or whatever, and everyone, it's like real gimmicky. It's real like, ooh. And I find it so weird. I think back to like them, and maybe there's merit in this, I'm not really sure, but like the splitting of us up, because my primary school was co-ed and then went to an all-girls school later. Anyways, and yeah, the idea of like splitting us up as well, that like, you know, again creates that sort of like different culture thing. And I have no recollection of any sort of sex ed in terms of like consent. Like it was beyond basic. I don't even remember them like properly talking about sex. It was more like about periods and like menstruation and all that kind of stuff. So I have no recollection of any. I mean, to the point where like a lot of people that I speak to, like women and like gender diverse people have that, like a lot of them have that experience where they've actually been in at least one or multiple like non-consensual situations and haven't known and it probably happens on the other end, I'm sure, for men too, like where they don't realize that they've like engaged or been engaged with like a non-consensual act, and they don't know like why they, you know, were not okay, because they haven't actually been taught that just because you're making out with someone at a party doesn't mean that then they can touch you. Like I think you don't get the education, you're learning it off peers. We all know that's, as we've just talking about, the culture is like corrupt, and so then you just put up with it. Like I know as like, you know, women and stuff, like you just like as a teenager, because of that lack of education, you're like, well, I guess this is right then. I'm like engaging in some sort of a sexual act. I'm kissing this boy. And so therefore I guess like he's allowed to touch me. I don't know, even though that feels uncomfortable, like, you know, because you weren't taught. And like, I can definitely say, and like, I think anyone that I've spoken to about consent or even sex ed, like I haven't met anyone actually to this day that's been like, I had a really good, the only people that have is because their parents have been amazing at home at like talking to them about that stuff. I've never heard anyone say that like at school they were given good sex ed. It's all like very basic, very like, let's just get this over and done with sort of thing.
Let's get through it. My sex ed was in a geography class from memory. A teacher took it upon herself to, right, guys, we got to figure this out. But I think I was so young and immature that it was like, oh my God, we're really doing this. And I couldn't understand or comprehend any of it. And then the next iteration of that for me, and I'm sure a lot of young men, was porn and learning sex ed through porn, which is so far from what it's actually like most of the time, and probably the worst representation of what having sex is.
I wonder, how do you feel like your lack of sex ed influenced your like early intimate experiences?
Oh, I think it was a shock, to be honest. It was a shock when, things were progressing and I was about to have sex. It was like, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing or what to do. I think I was really lucky that I was in a position where I was in a relationship and we literally just talked the way through it. But I could imagine, and hot take with absolutely no education behind this, I think porn is the worst thing for young men particularly. And yeah, often it's rough in the videos, it's not loving, it's not, there's no connection and so on.
Yeah, you can see, I was just going to say, you can see how easily that shapes a young person's attitude or like what they think is supposed to happen, like there's a process in porn. They kiss, then there's maybe oral or whatever, and then they have sex, and then he comes. And maybe she comes.
It's the same kind of in movies as well.
Yeah,
they're kissing,
exactly.
they have sex, and then it's over. You're like, huh?
Yeah.
That's not real.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, Lou, like when you're actually in that situation, that's never how it goes. It's not like a script that's followed. It doesn't ladder up, it doesn't ladder down. And of course in porn, there's never discussion about consent or, are you cool with this? No, yes. Like there's never any of that. So that you're just carrying that, especially as a young guy, if that's where you're learning about sex for the first time, like you're carrying that into an actual real life sexual experience, and it's cooked. Like it's nothing like reality.
So that is totally training your brain to think like, oh, women love it and I have to do this, even when as a man you might be really uncomfortable with doing that. Like that's not everyone's preference to be really aggressive and dominant. It's such a shame that that's what we're given in the absence of good consent education. Bit of a spicy question, but do you think that the like early gender norms that are drilled into us stereotypically contribute to feelings of like entitlement to sex in young boys? And how so? And how does that sort of play out?
You see it in younger blokes, but you see it in adults as well. Like where you go on a date and almost one of the first questions, and I don't think the question itself is necessarily like inspiring bad behavior, but one of the first questions you ask if your mate goes on a date almost can be sometimes, oh, did you guys sleep together? Did you go home together? You know? And I think sometimes, like even a friend of mine recently was on date number 4 and they hadn't kissed. And almost for some reason culturally that was, you know, I did respond, that's a bit bizarre, you know, and it shouldn't be like that. But I guess culturally we're thinking about dating and young people dating. But he, I must say, you know, and I'm totally on his side with this, he definitely doesn't come across in the way that like it's time we should be sleeping together. It's been 4 dates. He doesn't have that. And neither do I, but I can see how almost even in the schoolyard or let's say the high schoolers and then going into 17, 18, it's like this base, like first base. Oh, did you pash? And then like, did you do this? And then did you do that, etc. And so then almost it can translate as you get a bit older as well as like this kind of progression, which naturally does progress in a relationship the more you become intimate, etc. But yeah, I think I definitely can see how young blokes who are in that early dating period will get to a point where they, you know, are expecting to have sex. And yeah, I don't know how to phrase it correctly, but
it's almost something you want to like get off the line, you know, like quick, let's get it done. I need to have sex so that I've got one under the belt and then can like kind of move on with my life.
And I think you can see as a young guy, like if you're talking to your mates saying, you know, I just had a date the other night, the first question is, did you have sex? Like that's pressure. Eventually you're going to feel so much pressure that you push the boundaries. You know, step over the line a little bit. And that evidence and research shows that that's young men feeling that pressure to be hypersexual. That is when, consent is maybe pushed to the side and that's where they're making those mistakes. So it's a great point. One I hadn't really thought of. That from my experience as well, that first question is always sort of like, did you whatever?
Yeah, I think you feel that as well, like as a teenager. Like I even think back to the experiences I had, and I think it's so interesting from the other side. There's actually this pressure to like keep your like be, you know, a cool girl and like be friends with the boys and, you know, kiss and maybe have a boyfriend and whatever, but like don't you'll be a slut if you like push it too far. So like find that line, and then like especially with hindsight, you feel that pressure from like adolescent boys. Like I think like a lot of experiences that friends have had or I even had and stuff like that was that like so they could go and tell their mates like, oh, I just fingered this girl, you know, just to be cool and say that they'd done another thing, because like that's the social norm within like adolescent boys is to be, that's how you like your social commodity. That's like how you remain cool. Yeah, I'm just really just adding on to what you said, you know, and it's interesting that it's still, you say that it's still in like a very subtle way is even playing out now with like your instinct being like, you know, because I that's not my instinct. If my friend's gone on a date, I'm like, oh my God, how was it? Tell me about it. I never think to ask if they've slept together.
Yeah, I think it still does kind of bleed on into adulthood as well, where even sometimes I will announce it before a friend even asks. So like, oh, you know, went on this date and we had a really nice time, didn't camp over, like just probably called it at like midnight. But it comes up in the topic of, did you sleep together, you know, and for some reason, you know, it's being so invested in what our friends are doing, you know. Yeah, totally. No, exactly right. 100%. I agree. It's so true. But yeah, I think it kind of bleed on a little bit into our adulthood even still, yeah.
There's one really interesting point that I'd really like to make in that there's like a line that's crossed somewhere along the way there in that question being asked. But the research and evidence does also show that the more young people are speaking about having sex and consent and everything like that, their attitudes are better. So it's a difficult one there's a balance somewhere in there. Like if you speak to your mate, you'll be like, yeah, you know, we went to have sex, like it just wasn't quite right, didn't quite work. Like that's going to contribute positively to your experiences in the future.
I totally agree with that. I feel like I still do this with my friends. Asking them about their sexual intimacy is almost like a safety mechanism, because we're going, just checking in, are you feeling like satisfied, safe, comfortable? Like, is he making you come? But more importantly, like, is it consensual? And then in opening up that conversation, then you can find out if something's awry. So there are totally benefits to it. It's just like, is it the most important thing? And do we go, oh, sick, you scored, moving on? Like, having an actual conversation about it would be really interesting. I'd love to know how you think your intimacy might have been different if you had learnt about consent. Like, what would have been easier?
Like sex education versus consent education. I grew up in a school and around people, my parents, obviously, and family, where consent I knew exactly what consent was from a very young age. But on the sex education piece, I had no idea which way was up. So yeah, I forgot what your question is, but just like maybe I'm hearing it a little bit differently, but like the consent education very different to the sex education.
Yeah, I think I mean consent education holistically around like you got to get a yes or it's not a go. And I mean, like, did we learn about boundaries? Did we learn about power imbalances? Like when you're sort of 16 sleeping with a 19-year-old, like what kind of power imbalances might be there? Like that stuff all impacts your capacity to give genuine consent. So did you feel like you learned that?
When I was younger, say compared to now, is like, I guess, so when you're younger and you first start having romantic and sexual partners, it's awkward, right? You're first getting into it, you've just started that journey in your life, and there's this awkwardness around it. Like, usually you're pretty quiet, you're not chatting that much, you're not asking questions, you're just kind of doing, like what you mentioned before, what you've seen online or what you've seen in movies or what your mates have said, what, this representation of having sex is in your mind before you start doing it, right? And then as I've gotten older, like, yarning during sex, asking your romantic partner if they're okay with this, if they like this, am I okay to do this? It's not a mood kill. It's not a vibe kill by bringing it up. If anything, it's the opposite. Yeah, totally. The complete opposite effect, So, and sometimes in those earlier days when you do ask a romantic partner a question, and they're new to it as well, there is a bit of a awkwardy moment, but that communication is really important. And I've found as I've gotten older, before even engaging sexually with a partner, is asking those questions, what they like, what they don't like, what they would like me to do, et cetera, et cetera. It has that complete opposite effect of awkwardness, and it opens it up and creates a better connection and a more enjoyable time. And so, yeah, maybe when I was younger and first engaging with romantic and sexual partners, perhaps I'd performed an act that the person, wasn't a fan of. And they would communicate that. So then going forward next time, I would ask that person, even if it was something that was really normal, what I deem normal and stereotypical in a sexual relationship, I would still ask them anyway. And they could say, of course, yeah, of course, rah. So, I just think, I had I've always had pretty fortunate and positive sexual encounters over my life. But yeah, just asking that question and seeing if they're okay with that and if they like that, and asking what they would like. And then that really opens it up as well and helps. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I had proper education around both sex ed and like consent and like all that stuff, I would have, because I didn't have any consensual sexual experiences until I was like 18, 19. And that would have like changed the landscape, I think, of my life. I would have understood, firstly, like things that had happened, but also potentially the piece around finding my like voice around that and like being able to talk to someone or being able to, maybe you don't really know, but like maybe if I had more of an education and was more empowered by conversations and like all that sort of stuff, maybe I would have been able to speak up for myself, like in the moment, to be able to, like, obviously there's like a freeze thing and, I have also been in instances where I have done that and it doesn't matter. But like, I think in other situations it would have meant, I don't know, more of an understanding also of like what was happening and why that wasn't okay and why I felt uncomfortable. I think it's hard for me because I don't really know with my experiences sexually or how I felt about sexuality. I don't know whether they were informed by, traumatic experiences which made me guarded or that I was closeted. Like, I think it's all goes in, But I think if I learnt more about like my body and about my own pleasure and about, even pleasuring like myself and stuff like that, I think I would have had a very different experience than even with coming out. Like, I think I struggled with my sexuality from a young age, but you're sort of taught that like men are very like lackluster and like it's not about you and blah blah blah. So I just thought my like lack of attraction was both because of these like many traumatic experiences that made me scared of men, but then also that like, well, I'm not feeling lit up inside because I'm actually not meant to. And it wasn't until a friend, literally, like when I was in a relationship and with a man and I'd never like pleasured myself, and my friend, I don't know, it must have come up in conversation, and she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, no, never. And she was like, okay, like, what? I was maybe like 20 by this stage. She like educated me and she took me to a sex store, and like, then the woman in the store was so beautiful and like educated me, and I was like, oh, okay. And it was crazy. It was like through learning that autonomy over my own body, I ended up then leaving that relationship and then like coming out, like finding that like freedom and understanding, like even in myself. So I think it would have changed my life in like many ways, not only the consent piece and that, but also just like more of an in-depth, I don't know, like culture around, sex ed and about like sex and about pleasuring yourself and what pleasure looks like and how it should feel and like all that sort of stuff. Cause I just didn't have any baseline, and then had bad experiences because of the consent stuff, couldn't make sense of it because of a lack of education. So it was all just like muddy, and I was like, I don't think I like anything, which wasn't the case. I didn't understand.
And you need to almost know what you like to be able to communicate that. I remember when I was young, like asking someone, like, what do you like? And I don't know. I thought, oh, fuck, like,
No,
we're a long way back here. Shit, I don't know either. Now what?
That's such a great point, Louis. Because I think you said earlier, like asking people what they like. I remember the first time someone asked me that and I went, oh God, I got no idea. Because I'd just been influenced by porn. And I was like, no, I know I don't like what I see on there. But, and we hear this from so many young people too, like the very first step in improving your intimacy is just spending time with yourself to figure out what you like. And also, Kath, to your point, this is kind of why like inclusive and comprehensive sex education is so important too, that like accounts for the diversity of gender and sexuality too, or else you just like really confusing people and really limiting them.
Yeah, and even like back to the schoolyard stuff, like I remember struggling with my sexuality as young as like 6, but then all the schoolyard chat was that like the word lesbian was like a dirty word. And like, I remember there was this like a lesbian couple in like a few years older, and it was like the whole school spoke about it, like they're lesbians, like they did this, they did that, and it was like this disgusting, vile thing. So then, and then I'm not getting, like, we didn't talk about gender or sexuality at all, like on top of many other things that we didn't talk about in sex ed. And so then for me, every time I'd have these thoughts and feelings, it would just make me like anxious, or I'd cry, or I'd like, you know what I mean? Because I was like, well, I cannot be that thing. That's like a terrible thing to be. And it's because the only education I had was in the schoolyard of people saying it derogatory, you know?
Do you think that right now people can like feel and be accountable for mistakes that they've made around consent? Or do we think that's still too taboo to do?
There is a culture now because of social media that is this obsession with moral perfectionism, that I think people are scared to then make mistakes or take accountability, or if they take accountability, it's admitting wrongdoing and then they could be destroyed for it. So I think that's maybe where my brain went with that. And then, yeah, and it feels like, we're in this weird maybe culture thing at the moment where no one can sort of say the right thing. And if you admit that you've maybe done something wrong, there is a possibility in the zeitgeist at the moment that you could just be like destroyed from it, rather than people focusing on the grey of like how amazing that person is willing to take accountability and learn from it and share their learnings. Like let's all do that. And obviously there's levels to that conversation, but yeah, I think it'd be great, and I think we should, but I don't know if maybe the world is ready now. Maybe we're reaching a tipping point where people are over this real black and white thinking, but I'd love to see it. I don't know if people would feel safe to do it. I'm not sure.
I think accountability is always going to be hard.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about that. If you've done some heinous shit, then it should be pretty difficult to own up to that or be open about that. Like it's not going to be easy. We're not just all going to clap you on because you said you did it. And I think kind of blue skies, like it is easy to catastrophize with social media and everything. It doesn't actually have to go on social media, firstly, is you being accountable. But secondly, like there's never been more support networks, I'd say, than ever before, from what I can tell. There's never been more opportunity to speak up as someone, you know, if you don't feel like you have a voice or whatever, there's all these platforms and forums and, you know, systems and things like what you guys are doing, which are encouraging that. So I think like there is always room and people can always be accountable. But yeah, if you've done some horrific shit, then of course it's going to be difficult.
Do you guys have thoughts on like so-called cancel culture and how that's playing into this? Kath, I feel like you were almost there when you were talking about the black and white, but were you trying to avoid saying that term because it's a bit shitty? Yeah.
Cancel culture. No, that's kind of, I guess, my point. And I think it bleeds then into the real world, which is what we're all living in, because of things like cancel culture, where then people are scared. And I don't want to speak for everyone. And like, it's these conversations are tricky to have and maybe scary to have, even because you could get cancelled for saying it. But like, yeah, that like you're gonna be destroyed for making a mistake. And obviously, again, there's levels to that. But I think my issue with cancel culture and how far we've kind of leaned into that, and I think there is a little bit of people coming back around and going, okay, like we went so far that way and it hasn't helped us in certain ways, so how do we sort of find that grey? I think those conversations are happening and people are sort of, I think, getting a bit fed up maybe with that side of social media of like lacking the nuance, lacking the humanness, lacking the grey. And yeah, I think it is a little bit unproductive. I think we should hold people to account where it's important. And I think that's where it sort of started, this really great thing from social media, having different voices of people being like, hey, like what you said is like really offensive to me or this community, or think about it like this. And that's amazing. That's what we should be doing. And then you hope it's met with like, oh, I'm so sorry because of my blind spots or because of this, or just because I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to go and educate myself and reflect on that, and I'm going to come back better. Great. Like that's the world I want to live in. And I think that was sort of the beginning stages of that, like in quotation marks, cancel culture. And then it went so far the way of then we became, I feel like, obsessed with, I keep saying the same word, but I can't think of another term right now, moral superiority and pointing the fingers at each other in order to feel better about our own lives. And I sort of equate it to like road rage. Like people talk about road rage when I hate the term road rage personally, because I'm like, it's just rage. But it's this idea of like, someone's in a car, you can't see them, you're not face to face with them, and they make a mistake. And because we're all so like anxious and we're all constantly dealing with our immortality, and that's really scary, and like what are we doing here, and what is this, and where do we go, we're constantly dealing with that subconsciously, and we all make mistakes that at any point someone else does, and you can call them out on it. It gives you a moment of like reprieve from your own anxiety that you're kind of shoving down like this, because the world is really confusing and scary and weird and wacky and heartachy. And so I think cancel culture has actually become a product of like like I think it's a symbol like of that. And I think the beginnings of it were great, this holding to account. I think we should do that. We should call people in and create conversation of why, you know, certain things should change, or you can't say that because it's offensive and whatever. I think that's important. But I think we sort of took it the road rage route of then using it as a way to shame people to make us feel better, rather than creating conversation. And yeah.
What does accountability look like, both short and long term, in a situation where, like, as we've discussed, after reflection, you realise that you didn't get it right when it came to consent?
Accepting the fact, or being accountable of the fact you did something wrong, would be probably step one. And then from there, I would imagine, and I'm not sure if this is right, but talking to the victim or the person, and coming to terms with that, and kind of having conversations, and then asking them what you can do to make amends where possible. Kind of makes sense to me.
Adding on that, maybe as well, like especially if any, you know, people are listening and have that sort of question, like I think it's the taking accountability to the person, I think is important, but in a way that's like non-threatening, whether that be a message that they do not have to open, or a letter that they do not have to open, where you're not asking them for something, you know what I mean? Like I think if you're going to take accountability to the person, if that's what you want to do, and I guess, and you should do, it should be in a way that isn't like then asking for some sort of emotional labor from that person that may never want to fucking look at your name ever again. And that's their prerogative if that's what they choose. Or you could be lucky and it's welcomed and there's a conversation. But I think that taking accountability in a way that is like non-threatening and you're not asking for something, and then maybe going to resources like Teach Us Consent to do your own educating and stuff like that, rather than putting the onus on like the victim or on with women to be the ones to be like, don't do this, or like, don't, you know what I mean? It's like women and people in minority groups have to deal with that stuff all the time, that it's like use the resources that are there to create change within yourself, because then I think that's when people get maybe like annoyed or fed up, because they're like, I'm doing all this emotional like labor, but I'm also copping it. I'm in a society that's like, you know, I think that goes for any, that's not even like talking about consent, even that goes for any minority group, you know, like do that work yourself.
Giving someone an apology without expecting something in return, like it is like truly acknowledging you've buggered up, and it's not to try and get yourself out of shit. Like it's about just owning what you've done, and feeling that as well, which I liked us discussing, that feeling that emotion of being upset at yourself, being able to eventually forgive yourself. You might bugger up, make a mistake, say something you didn't mean, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it is being honest, and also it's not making excuses for yourself when you apologize. I think you can explain on the back end of an apology why you think you may have done that. You know, it could be, you know, something smaller. It could be just you're building a bit of a case as to maybe what led to the behavior. But definitely meaning it and not expecting something in return, I think is a nice way to go about it.
And it's like the difference between sorry because you did it, not sorry because you got caught, you know. It's a big difference.
My dad, I didn't have much of a relationship with him when I was younger, and he went away and did a lot of like reflection and a lot of self-development, and he's like an unrecognizable person, and he came to, I have siblings, but he came to me and like, you know, apologized. And I always I think he's the reason why, firstly, I believe people can change and like really change, and how, you know, you can mend relationships when someone not only takes accountability but like does the work, and then that work and that sort of like apology is like ongoing, that it's never like, oh, I said sorry, so now you have to get over it. It's like this real, I don't know, the way when I like visualize it, when I think about how profound that was and how profound that relationship is to me, it felt like this real like bearing of like soul, of like, I see this so clearly. Like I see this experience and I understand it, and I am sorry. And it again, that thing of putting it on the table, like this like gift, not this like, I'm so sorry. Like it's like, I see it, I'm bearing it, I'm wearing it, and I'm also like giving you this gift of like, you know, like you are so validated in your experience, like do what you will with that. And it makes you, well, for me, in that, obviously it's different, it's a parental relationship, it made me just want to come forward because I felt this like openness and this like real change that this person had actually like self-developed. And I think even like along that journey when things sort of pop up, again, there's never this like, well, I said sorry for the thing, so we're done with that now, right? It's still this like, you know, having an emotion, having a thing and being able to go, and the person's still being able to, you know, hold you in that moment and be like, yep, like let's, like I'll hold you in this, and I will like, you know, have that sort of reflection. So yeah, I think apologies can be really powerful when they're met with this like, you feel understood, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel like your experience of whatever's sort of made you upset that you think is deserving of an apology, it's been seen so clearly. And I think the only way someone can do that is by really actually taking that introspection and wanting to actually change themselves and their behavior. Otherwise, I feel like it is potentially coming from that place of like, I want to rid myself of this bad feeling, rather than that thing I was saying before, like marinating in it and then learning and then coming forward. And I think that sort of energy, I mean, I'm sure it can be, but like in a way it's hard to not meet that, you know, with humanness, because someone's like so open and they're like bearing themselves and they're seeing you, and like I think that's so empowering to the other person and very like healing as well.
In that sense, it's like being on the receiving end of an apology or apologizing, you know, you're not that you're necessarily wanting to get something out of it, and that's the whole point we're making here, but it strengthens the relationship, right? Like I'm sure your dad wanted to have a relationship with you and you wanted to have a relationship with your dad. So in apologizing and being like, I think you're getting like, it's the authenticity of it that makes it good. And it's not something you can be like, you know, he was looking me in the eyes. It's, you feel it.
Yeah, you feel that like,
you can really feel it.
Someone actually wanting to, better themselves. And you see it in the, like, I even see it with if I use my dad for an example as well, he's such, like, I've seen him do this with other people and stuff, like, even in past things, if someone's like, I need space or like whatever, and he's a therapist now, so he's extra good at this stuff, but he's so good at being able to like validate like that, like not like he might have his own obviously feelings and whatever, but he's so good at not getting defensive and just being like, sure, like if that's what you need, this is what I think, I love you, like blah blah blah, take your time. Like I'm like, wow, that's really that, like not needing something from someone. I even know me, like I go to him a lot of the time in like relationships when I'm having relationship problems. I had something recently where again I think I was doing that thing where I felt sort of caught up in this thing and I wanted to be like forgiven and it to be fine, and he essentially like called me out on the thing we're talking about of like, you're actually being incredibly selfish because you're in a panic, you're not actually coming to the situation taking accountability, you know, you're just panicked that you want someone to forgive you because you're scared of, you know, this and that. Anyways, to sum it up, I think it's that actual properly taking accountability piece. I think your apologies will actually be met selflessness because you're not trying to get something.
I think there's one thing that I don't think we maybe have touched on, or maybe not, but it's like, it's obviously going beyond words. So like, I can see a scenario where someone apologizes or you apologize to someone. In that moment, it's like, I don't know, like it's sort of hanging in the air there, and then 6 months time they do it again to someone else, and you're like, well, that was a shit apology.
It's apology with action. That's what actually
exactly
means
right.
something.
Yeah, and if someone apologizes and says, I'm not going to do that again, either to you or to themselves, and don't do it, like that's where that growth comes from.
Yeah, I see you and I raise you, realizing that you've done something wrong, and then realizing that you could help your friends not do that wrong thing as well. Like the next layer of accountability might be not only changing your own behavior, but going like, God, I know a bit now and I can see how this really hurts someone, and I'm going to make it my job to go that extra step and like call my mates out or have a chat with a family member. Like you become quite empowered with that new knowledge and that healing that you can go through. Maybe.
Great segue to the next question.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. What is it?
Helping, like we obviously all play a role in this, and helping others reflect and holding them to account is an important part of that, probably the most important. Have you ever, if you can think of a scenario, a literal, like a specific scenario, or maybe talk around one, have you ever had to hold a friend or an acquaintance accountable when it came to consent or their behaviour about consent?
Can I talk about a time where I actually didn't?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's really interesting, like, I think too, being a queer person, I don't know, sometimes the experience of like consent and that, it's not that it's different, it's the exact same fucking format, follow it. But like, I mean, like when someone, I guess doesn't, you don't, sorry, what am I saying? I, in this example, didn't give consent and sort of ended up in like, again, that not wanting to hurt feelings and freeze response and then feeling weird. And like, you're like, but it's like, but then in my head, I knew that I felt to my bones that it came from a lack of understanding from the individual. And I knew that this person was a good person. And I really wanted to have a conversation really like beautifully and be like, hey, like this made me feel uncomfortable, but like maybe you didn't, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't, because I got not scared, but like maybe like I don't know, like and I think too, I felt like, oh, I didn't want to like, I don't know, I think I was like, which is crazy to think about, right? Like that, I had such an opportunity to meet this person and not shame them, but just be like, hey, like for next time, for, whatever, like, but I didn't. And I probably regret it. Maybe life's long, it's not too late. But I probably like regret it. And now I kind of always feel a bit uncomfortable around this person, even though I know they're a good person, because I feel like I'm withholding this experience and then like this chance to like educate this person I think is like a good person.
I have a story that's like slightly adjacent to me, but there's a bloke back where I'm from, Adelaide, and he's got like a Herculean body. He's quite feminine though, and he's friends with heaps of girls. He has just heaps of straight women friends, and he is a straight man, and he can be quite touchy and imposing. And there were a few women who were like uncomfortable about it. It's not like they felt, it's not like he'd crossed a line really badly, but I just think he wasn't aware of how his presence made people feel and how people sometimes just didn't want to be touched like that because he is bigger in stature, and as women we kind of learn that like men are big and scary and they can hurt you and kill you. So unfortunately for him, that's the body he lives in and that's his reality. And we told one of his male mates, who then sort of told him in private when they were having a beer once, and wasn't alarmist about it at all, was just like, hey man, I've heard some things, and maybe just be a little bit more mindful about it. And he took it so well and like progressively didn't give us like full-blown apologies, but was like, hey, I'm like learning about this and realizing, and like, sorry if I've ever made you uncomfortable. I love you. I'd never hurt you. And it was just, it was a wonderful experience for everyone. Yeah. Like that level of accountability is minor, but awesome. And a great example of our friends, or like men being role models to step in on behalf of women who are a little bit too scared to say, hey, mister, don't touch me.
If that situation did happen, how would you go about it? How would you, if a friend, so like, was talking about, you said they rocked up, you said, how'd you go last night? And they said, yeah, we had sex. And then they mentioned that it didn't go, they mentioned something that triggered to you, something that you've learned about consent, like that they were putting pressure on or whatever it was. How would you go about having that conversation?
Even if it's like you're at a festival and someone just like wolf whistles, you make wolf whistles at someone, like it can be like low-level sexual harassment as well. Yeah.
Yeah, even in that, right? For example, it's like you don't, in these lower level stuff, which can stop the more hectic stuff happening later, almost like an early intervention and trying to change people's behavior. But obviously not humiliating them in front of the crowd, especially in those early stages. Like if, I don't have any mates that I've ever seen catcall a woman, but if I did, come on, brother, dude, leave him alone, dude. Like, rather than humiliate him and embarrass him in front of every single person, because like that humiliation and embarrassment might not necessarily inspire or promote behavioral change. But having just a quick yarn that like, come on, dude, it's kind of not on, man. Like, come on, brother. Like, leave her alone, bro. Leave her alone, dude, But also if it was more in that sexual partnership that a friend had with someone or interaction, just saying like, oh, man, you should probably ask the person next time if they're down for that. You know what I mean? Ask the person if they're okay with that. I don't know. I think I really try and I want to be there for my friends, so if a friend did reveal that something had gone down and he'd make someone very uncomfortable by doing something, I'd try and inspire him next time to open that communication up firsthand. That's what I imagine I'd do in that situation.
I think I've seen mates before and they're just like totally missing the boat. Like you're not picking up what she's putting down, and it's like sometimes you just need to be like, hey, I don't know if this is on. It's as simple as that. But I think, anecdote, like if something were to happen and, the way your friends went about it, I think that's the best way to do it is kind of don't get their walls up to start off with so you can actually get through, have the conversation, say, hey, I think like maybe by doing this is what's happening, and kind of laying it out for them so it's super clear. And if they continue after that, well, then there's big problems, I think.
I've seen situations where I've noticed something and I've been like, I don't know if she's uncomfortable or like if like there's been a time where like there was no one around, I was on a quiet street and this man was like screaming at this woman and I obviously like needed to do something, but I was like, how do I? And I was like, I'm just gonna be calm and I'm gonna go up to her. Like I'm gonna look at her in the eyes and give her that look of like, do you need, like, are you okay? Like, are you cool? Like, do you want to come hang out? Like, you want to, so even it's like that piece of just like stepping in a wave, even if you're like a bit unsure, it's either like, if you see it, just be like, oi mate, knock it off. Or, you can just ask, be like, hey, are you cool? Like, you give that, we can all, non-verbal communication is real and we all know how to do it. So like, yeah.
I will say it's really interesting to watch both of you sort of like, you boys be shocked at the concept of someone like grinding on someone in a club or catcalling because like you keep good company. Yeah. Your mates wouldn't, but like most women that has happened to. And it is the norm, unfortunately, at the moment for that to happen. So then calling it out or intervening is resistance. And I love that reframe of like you're actually going against the grain every time. Like you're being quite strong in doing that, and that is sort of real strength to me. Like there's a lot of chat about masculinity and physical strength, but intervening when it's not the social norm and you're helping someone out and you're putting your neck on the line to do it, that is real strength.
Oh, can I just add in on something?
Yeah.
I think just another nice way of like that support is even just recently I was at a bar in regional New South Wales and I saw a very, very drunk man harassing some women, just more going up to their table. It was two girls and his like, I guess his friends, they weren't really friends, but anyway, a group of blokes said, bro, leave her alone. Like they were very light about it initially. Leave him alone, man. Like you're being a piss wreck. Leave him alone, etc. And I remember sitting there and just thinking to myself, if they weren't there and I had to intervene personally, if you are frightened of a physical altercation, if you're not in the mood for a fight, which for most people aren't, if you're a bloke and you're physically threatened by another fella who's harassing women, it's like some of the lower level things or some of the other alternative methods are to, like, if you're in a venue setting, would be like alerting security or a bar member, or if the girl tells him to piss off, go and check on her, see if she's okay. Hey, I just noticed that bloke was harassing you, like, are you all good to get home? Like, I'm with some friends and some girlfriends and like they're happy to share an Uber with you. So just another alternative method. If you're not in the position to like physically break it up, then offering that support after or alerting someone that can help is also like an alternative method.
I think too, as men, like being a good ally is setting the tone, being like, nope, like immediately, we don't put up with that. That's not what we do here. The more men do that, then it just changes. And people are like, oh, we don't do that. We don't do that.
And the evidence shows that most people don't agree with it. So you might feel like you're going against the grain, but you're not. And it takes just one person that has the courage, or, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about strength and courage because it doesn't necessarily take that, but it takes one person just intervening and doing something for then more people to do that same thing next time. And that's where the change starts.
I think it's also, so if I can build upon that, like if anyone knows anything about the bystander effect, it's so real. And I think a lot of those situations, many situations, but if we use this example, it's also that. It's like people's inability to like jump in. When most people, like you're saying, like even the stats show it, most people would see a man harassing a bunch of women and be like, what a dickhead. But people are too scared. But the bystander effect is like once one person done it, then everyone's like, can relax and be like, oh, we could do it too. So I know it's hard because, I mean, psychologically, that's why they invented that, but it's being the person that actually just steps back and be like, wait, this is actually not okay, or something strange is happening, or like that was inappropriate. And whether you want to use the word courage or whatever, but like it's also just being a leader, like, taking charge and and like being like, I'm going to be a leader in this moment, and I'm going to like pave the way for other people in this room that I know are thinking the same things as me but are too scared to like, they don't want to rock the boat, I don't want to like,
Say if you're thinking back to when you're sort of like 15, 16, 17, start going to house parties and things like that, and maybe, it's your first or second experience having a drink or a beer or whatever. Those situations happen all the time where a guy is probably feeling that pressure to speak to a woman or whatever it is. And you can see that the person he's talking to isn't into it. He's like borderline, if not full-blown harassing her. What would you do there? What advice would you have for someone in that situation?
Well, I could just start with like saying, especially for the younger people out there, like if you do see your mate, they're annoying a girl at the party, they're not reading the room, that she's not interested, especially in the earlier ages. Again, no need to try and bring any direct shame in those earlier parts of the interaction, but even just grabbing him like, hey bro, let's go outside, like let's go for a cruise, let's get a drink, hey bro, like let's, we're moving on, and kind of pulling him away like that. Even if then after that, like, no, brother, no, she's, I don't think she's that keen, man. I think she might be in a relationship. I think, man, she's not that keen, or whatever that might be, to try and like essentially disrupt the pattern of behavior of a bloke kind of annoying someone, harassing someone. That's kind of what springs to mind first is those two.
Yeah, even like, if your mate's chatting to a woman at a party and you can clearly see she's not vibing it, even kind of getting one of her friends and saying, should we go over and like kind of join in that conversation? So at least she's not alone in the situation. But yeah, I think as well, either just go and grab him. If you're 16 at a party, maybe it's probably a great opportunity to try everything we've spoken about and say, hey, like she's clearly not vibing it.
It's probably one of those things, like as a mate, you almost have more responsibility. And maybe that's hard to hear, maybe not. That like you can do that. Like a random walking up to a bloke and going, come here, mate. Like that doesn't work. Like that's where that confrontation is going to happen. But if it is your mate, like you can absolutely feel that responsibility to go and do something about it. It's much easier for you than it is for the person he's harassing or for a random.
And also your mates are such a reflection of you, like it should be personal. If your friend is someone who makes people feel, particularly women, feel uncomfortable, it should really hit you hard, I think.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Some great conversations, like really valuable insights and stories of your own, and tips for people, that young people, we know they're struggling with these things, and something that they can really take away and take use from. So thanks so much for joining us and taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.